This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have a guest that is one of the sharpest minds in fantasy football. He's the director of analytics and lead fantasy analyst at Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. It's the one and only Dwain McFarland. Welcome to the show, my man.
Hey man, I really appreciate you having me on, and I don't know how to follow up the intro. So thanks for being so kind. But over at Fantasy Life, I was one of the first analysts to come over there. So at the time it was lead, but I don't even know. I feel like we should take that away. Like we have the Ian Hartitz at our site. We've got Peter Overzet. We've got Matthew Friedman. We've got Kendall Valenzuela. I mean, our team is so stacked. Like I feel like it's just okay. Fantasy analysts. Just leave it as fantasy analysts because we have so many superstars.
That is true. You have fantasy Avengers. You even just added
there you go.
To
fantasy
the mix,
Avengers.
right?
I like
you
that.
added a Thor to the mix. So I love all that, right?
Yep. Thor coming over, man. Another huge win. So yeah, the team just keeps on growing. Matthew won't stop. Elliot, Chris doing a great job leading the team. Super excited for what we have in store for everybody this season.
Absolutely. I know it's been so fun to see it grow and develop. And yeah, you guys are doing so many amazing things. For listeners that might be unfamiliar with your work, you are obviously very well known for your utilization report. Can you share a little bit about what that is? And then also, about your role at Fantasy Life?
Yeah, sure. So at Fantasy Life, I'm the director of analytics and then, also analysts, fantasy analyst. So I'm writing and recording every day, just like every other fantasy analyst. And as far as utilization report goes, yeah, that's something that really I had just gotten into on my own, 5 or 6 years ago. And I would always have these questions around, well, which running back's getting all the carries, inside the 5, which running backs are getting the 2-minute offense. And so I just started researching all this data and the play-by-play, looking at what roles were the most valuable for running backs and wide receivers and all these different positions. And then once I basically figured all that out, I then said, okay, well, let's capture all that and let's put that into a tool. And we built that over at Fantasy Life. And the utilization report used to just be tweets. Like way back in the day, man, it was just me putting out a tweet. And eventually I got more and more advanced data. Then I came over to Fantasy Life and we actually built out this suite of tools that people can go check out over at fantasylife.com. But you can go in and you can see, okay, great, who has all of these different roles? Like for the Chiefs backfield last year, you would have been able to quickly see that, oh my goodness, like Pacheco's role was really growing over the second half of the year. If you're looking for a young wide receiver to break out, you would have seen that Rashee Rice's route participation was increasing. So it's really meant to be something you can go in and look at and try to look for the, I would say you're trying to be ahead, right, of your league mates on as many things as you can. So you're looking for the trends around things that might indicate that, man, this player is about to be in a bigger role, or this player has taken over this very valuable role. Didn't work out last week. They didn't get a lot of fantasy points out of it. But in the future, that should be something that makes it more profitable to have them on your roster. So just trying to find little ways, to help people stay one step ahead of their league mates on the waiver wire, trades, all the things like that.
Yeah, and how cool is it to go from tweets and articles to actually have it, unfold on the site with the tools? Like people haven't seen it. You got to get to Fantasy Life. These tools are free. Like it's incredible and from your perspective, how fun is it to see it actually come to life like that?
Oh man, it's awesome. It's like you have these pinch me moments, in life, like getting to just do fantasy for a living is one, but then having something like that people actually like enough that you've created and they want more. And then to say, okay, well, great, let's build out these tools that people want to use. Man, it's awesome. It's also great for me because it makes my work a lot easier because I don't have to go manually pull all this stuff and build out all these sheets and things anymore. It's all automated. We've got it all being pulled through the back end. We've got a data partnership with Pro Football Focus, so they've been great partners. So yeah, it's awesome having it, and I'm thankful, man. And we're doing more. We have more that's going to be coming out this year. You're going to have a utilization score. So if you're somebody coming in, you're like, I'm not quite sure like what all these different things mean. Well, we're going to give you a score for every player that's essentially encapsulating, here are the most important parts of being a running back and their role. And then also bringing that together with a little bit of, okay, are they performing? And then you get a score for all these players, and then you'll be able to see trends. Are guys moving up or are guys moving down? So if you just want to come in and if you're hardcore, you're still going to be able to come in and see all the data. But if you just want to come in and quickly say, Dwayne, I have like 3 minutes here, man. I got 3 minutes and I'm just looking for one thing to tell me like who's trending up, who's trending down. We're going to have some new tools that are really aimed at folks wanting to do that. They're not up yet on the site, but we're actively building those.
And that's the coolest thing because, yeah, most fantasy consumers, I mean, there's so much data out there, right? Like they want things simplified, right? The average person in reality, like they want to find things simplified. So a score is such an easy way to get the data, get what you want without having to dive so deep into it. I love that. And obviously
and it's still 100% driven by all the things that matter and things that correlate to future fantasy success. So, I mean, to do this, I had to go back and essentially test the last 5 years of data and look at week over week, what are the stats that are most predictive, and checking those against the data points we were already pulling. Are there new things that we should be pulling? How do we weight these things? And then I looked at it rolling 4 weeks over rolling 4 weeks, which things are the best predictors of future fantasy performance. And then all of that essentially got baked into this utilization score. So there's a very strong correlation between the utilization score and then scoring future fantasy points at the position in the season.
Amazing. I love that. And obviously you have a passion for sports that you can't not have a passion for sports with what you've done in this space. Where did it all begin? Obviously growing up in Texas, Cowboys fan. Who were your favorite, teams and players growing up, and how big of a deal was sports to you?
I was always naturally drawn to sports, but I was also always naturally drawn to numbers and stats. The genesis of it comes from my dad. He was a huge Cowboys fan. And I remember the Cowboys were terrible. They went 1-15 and he watched every single game. And so I started watching with him that year. It was 1989. I was just a kid. I was fifth grade, sixth grade, somewhere in there at that time. And then the Cowboys got good. As I was going into high school, they won 2 Super Bowls while I was in high school. So that hooked me. And my dad, man, I would be sitting there on the couch with him and he would see things on the TV that I just didn't see. He would be like, oh, that's holding, or that's a penalty, or this just happened. Or he'd say, no, you got to use play action. Like he was way ahead of his time, to be honest. Like my dad was talking about play action before people were talking about play action. And he would call the defense out and he would talk about who the receiver was that was probably going to be targeted on the play. And I was blown away by it, to be honest. I was like, I'm not seeing all this. Like I'm just watching the quarterback drop back, and he was watching the linemen and all the other players and taking it all in. And so I learned a lot of it, like from him, like just looking up to him and being like, man, like he's really learned this game. He knows all about it. And so I fell in love with the process of it. And then like video games were huge. But back in the day when I first started playing video games, this kind of is going to age me a little bit, but they didn't have seasons. The game didn't keep track of your stats, or if there was a season, it didn't keep track of your stats. So whether I was playing a football game, a baseball game, I would manually, write out like the stats for all my players after each game. And I would have it for each week. And then I would know like where I was for the season. If there wasn't a season mode on the game, I would look at, okay, here's their actual schedule for the season. And then I would play that. I would actually manually play all those games out. My brother and I would spend countless hours playing Madden. I remember we would do games where you couldn't do anything but run the ball. And we would play Detroit against the Cowboys. And we were always trying to settle the debate of who's the better running back, Emmitt Smith or Barry Sanders. And we thought we were going to do this on Madden. And like, we would be loading up the box, like just trying to stop the run. And, but that was it. You couldn't throw the ball. You had to see who could get the most rushing yards. Was it Barry Sanders or Emmitt Smith? And it was Barry Sanders. I'm not going to lie. And it didn't really matter, which we were both pretty good at it. So like we would both switch back and forth, and usually Barry, would win that.
I love it. No, oh my gosh, you can't like that. That hits home for me for sure, because I'm the same way growing up, taking stats in my own sporting events.
Yeah, man.
I remember Baseball Stars as a video game was the first one that like kept stats, and I was obsessed, right? Like, so keeping stats in video games and obviously, Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith debate, that was huge in my life too, because I'm a huge Barry Sanders fan. So you hit me with some of that stuff. I love it.
Yeah, Barry, man, is amazing. And it's kind of funny how many people don't really, because now so many people that, I'm creating content for are so much younger than me. They're reading my stuff or listening to things. And how many people don't really know that much about Barry Sanders or Andre Johnson, or, there's just a lot of the greats. They haven't seen a lot of them. So I have to encourage them. I'm like, man, you just just go YouTube it and just watch the highlights. I'm not saying you gotta go study the player, but like Barry Sanders, that was something very special. That's something we probably, I know this is kind of an old man thing to say, but I mean, as you get older, I haven't seen it again. I've not seen another Barry Sanders. Like, I mean, I've seen guys that are similar to Bo Jackson, who was also elite, but I've never seen another Barry Sanders.
That's my thought all the time. Is like I've never seen a running back that has his style, his movement, his agility. Like there's just never been a
football player that made it work in pads, and grown men couldn't touch him.
It was just bouncing around the field. It was sensational for sure, and that says a lot. Coming from a Cowboys fan, I respect that type of opinion, because you got to be.
Hey, I love Barry, man. I love Barry, and there were a couple of years there where it was Cowboys versus the Lions as the Cowboys were coming up. At that time the Lions were pretty good. Wayne Fontes was the coach. You guys had Herman Moore. You had Scott Mitchell as the quarterback. I think it might have been Eric Kramer, maybe one of those years he came over from the Bears or whatever. But like, I remember the Scott Mitchell era there, and passing attack for a while. Brett Perriman was there. I liked a lot of the Lions players.
Yeah, Herman Moore was incredible, right?
He was legit. Yeah.
So
Johnny Morton was kind of the next group. Like after that, he was an underrated receiver. Yeah, man. I loved a lot of the Lions skill position guys.
That's great. Now, as a sports fan, what's your all-time favorite sports moment as a fan?
Oh man, it's the Cowboys Super Bowl. The first one for me, not the Cowboys official first Super Bowl, but it was 1992. And honestly, beating the 49ers in the championship game was the hugest part. Obviously, they go on to beat the Bills after that, but I mean, I can still remember the day. I remember that morning waking up for the game. I remember like my family members that came over. I remember my mom made sub sandwiches, meatball sandwiches. I remember everything about that day. I can tell you I can't tell you what everybody's wearing, but I remember the events of the day perfectly. And I remember the next year as well. And I remember like OJ Simpson being on playing Madden, and it was the Bills versus the Cowboys. And I can't remember who he was playing, but they were like trying to simulate the game, and the Bills won. I'm like, man, the Bills aren't winning. Like the Cowboys, we're about to thrash you guys again. And then, again in 95. And that was a sweet moment, for me and my life. And obviously like having that connection over sports with my dad, and my mom was a big Cowboys fan too. My mom loved the Cowboys as well. So it was a family affair.
I love that. Yeah, I think that with most people, their favorite sports moments, it's not just that moment. It's some of the sentimental stuff around it. So I think I love that. I love that answer. Growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up? And then eventually, how did your educational and professional background prepare you for the roles in fantasy that you've taken on?
I mean, when you're young and naive, you think like you can play sports at a professional level or whatever. So I dreamed in the front yard just like every other kid does. But like, as I got into high school and I started playing sports, I was like, okay, I'm not as good like as these other people. Like, I mean, I'm kind of okay speed, but I mean, I was never like super strong or super fast. I didn't have like any superhuman qualities, but I enjoyed playing and I enjoyed being around, other people. So I pretty quickly knew like that wasn't going to happen. And honestly, I didn't know for sure what I wanted, to do, but I knew that I was drawn to numbers. I knew that I was drawn, to data, and ultimately I was drawn to sports. So originally in college, like my original major was actually in coaching. And that's what I ended up. Actually, my original major was in marketing, and then I switched to coaching. I ended up not ever being a coach, and I never ended up being a teacher. I actually went into medical device sales. So like, anyway, like kind of got off on another path. I had an offer to go work, but it wasn't going to be for like another 4 months. So I had to have some sort of job, and I was like, okay, I'll go do this sales thing. And, one thing led to another, and all of a sudden you're making a salary that's more than I probably would have been making teaching 10 years in. And my wife's like, are you sure? Like, you really want to go back to the teaching thing? And we had a kid on the way. So I was like, you're probably right. So I'll keep doing the sales thing. But eventually, like, all roads did come back to data and analytics. I ended up working for a healthcare organization for about 10 years in their product and data and analytics department. Different various roles there and product management and things like that, and strategy stuff. So just continued working with numbers. And then all the time, like in my spare time, I was still researching football, baseball. I did for a while. Playing, a lot of DFS in the early days, and a lot of high stakes, fantasy leagues where, I was creating my own projections and rankings and all that kind of stuff. So just, that was my spare time. And then also I had a job that was also wrapped really around the same thing.
It's full circle, back to numbers, from playing video games as a kid to playing
Yeah.
with numbers these days. I love that.
That's what I tell my kids. Like, I'm like, look, like, what are you passionate about? And like, oh, playing video games. Well, what do you like about what kind of video games do you like? Why do you like them? Like figuring those things out about
Interesting.
yourself.
Yeah.
Like, are you a strategy person? Are you, more of a tactical person? Are you someone that likes repetition, or are you someone that likes change all the time? Like knowing those things about you, there's a lot of different jobs that you could like. It's not specifically, oh, I have to work in sports or I have to work here. Like, I love that. If you can make those things meet, like that can be a dream job, but sometimes you have to work your way towards that. Those kind of jobs aren't always just sitting there for you, right out of the gate, unless, you're an individual content creator and you start that early on when you don't have as many monetary needs. And so like you can build up your lifestyle, like as you grow your income on YouTube and things like that. So there's more options now, for younger content creators than there were like whenever I was first getting into the space. My first article was on Draft Sharks. I did an IDP article for them, and I did their IDP rankings, I think in 2002 or 3, I
Wow.
believe. Yeah, so a long time ago. And then after that, I did a little quick stint with RotoViz, where I wrote an evergreen article, but then my job responsibilities changed at work, and I got a promotion. I just didn't have time to keep writing, but I really liked RotoViz at the time. And then 10 years later, I go full time with PFF. So, I mean, like the road to how you get there, that fire was always burning. But I was attacking it from a career standpoint, in the corporate world first, but eventually it did lead back around to working in fantasy full time.
I love that. Some great wisdom, for your kids. I love that. And I didn't realize that you dabbled a little in fantasy so long ago. That's really cool how that unfolded. When did you find the game? Like, when did you find
One
fantasy?
guy really made me mad. My first article that I ever submitted trying to get a role with Draft Sharks, I wrote about situational running backs. This wasn't a thing. And I was writing about Tommy Vardell stealing touchdowns from Barry Sanders. And then I outlined all the other potential backfields where this could proliferate and happen and be a larger issue in the coming season. And I'm not lying, the editor that I submitted that to, and they're gone from Draft Sharks, so I'm not trying to belittle Draft Sharks. He literally stole the idea and wrote it for himself on their site.
No way.
Yeah, 100%. And then denied it. So because I reached out, and I eventually did get a job with Draft Sharks after that, like doing the IDP stuff. But my first article that I ever submitted to him, John Miller, I'll throw his name out there, but he totally stole my stuff.
I love it.
Sorry.
So when did you start playing fantasy, and what was it that hooked you initially?
I started playing
the numbers, but
fantasy in 1998.
Okay.
Randy Moss's rookie season. And I remember I wanted to draft Moss so bad, and I thought I would draft him ahead of everyone else. And a buddy in my league named Dave, who had really gotten me into fantasy, he was also really into it, and he freaking took Moss. And back then, like you could draft a rookie receiver in round like 9 or 10, no problem.
Yeah.
Like 12, 13, 14. And I remember I was prepared to take Randy Moss. I think my plan was to take him in round 7 just to make sure I got him. And my buddy took him in like round 4. And I was like, wow, like that's super aggressive. He later did this to me with Arian Foster and took him in the 2nd round. My plan was to take him in the 3rd round and make sure I got him the year that he broke out. So that he's one of my really good friends, and he was always my nemesis in these leagues. I had to start thinking, when is Dave going to be willing to take this player? Became the new question. Not when are the rest of my league mates going to be willing to do it. But 98 was the first year. My first championship was in 99.
Okay. Hey, good start.
Peyton Manning to Marvin Harrison Stack.
Can't beat that. You can't beat that.
Yep.
So is that Dave? Is he your all-time nemesis, all-time rival in fantasy?
Oh yeah, because he's in all my home leagues. So yeah, like we made trades last season where we still hang out, we still talk. We talk the most during fantasy season because he moved to Oklahoma. I'm in Texas. But yeah, it's a time when that time of year gets here, like we definitely are picking up the phone, calling. But I have plenty. My leagues are actually really good. It's funny. So Michael Moore, who used to write for PFF, he's written for several different sites. He's in my home league. I met Michael like 12 years ago, brought him into my league, and the next thing I know, he was writing for PFF before I was.
Wow.
So like we have a lot of really good players that are very serious. Like they all pay a lot of attention to it. I got a guy in my league named Jason. He makes trades all the time. I don't know how he pulls these trades off. He builds these super teams. He's really hard to beat, and he's very smart. Another guy named Brian, another guy named Perry. Like, man, they are all like super into this. They read a lot, they consume a lot, they think a lot about it. And those are both dynasty leagues now. We started off, those were redraft leagues, but they're now dynasty leagues. So we've got two big ones. They're IDP, super flex. So it's you start 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and then 2 more flex positions. So, I mean, and we've had those rules, and it's tight end premium. So we try to make it where like all the positions are super valuable. So obviously when you have those kind of rules, you have people that are in your league that they're really into it. Like they're super nerding out on this stuff like you are.
You can't beat a great home league. You guys have any like fun traditions that you've done over the years, like live drafts or?
Oh yeah, we live draft
like
and make fun of each other.
Yeah,
Ridicule each other as you make your picks. We don't have a big punishment though. It's funny, like punishments have really become the thing, and we've got the punishment generator over at Fantasy Life. Last year, I was so thankful in our Fantasy Life league. We had, I think, 16 of us, and the only person that didn't have to do a punishment was winning first place. So I have never worried so much about doing a draft because the punishments were insane. I did win first place. I knocked Matthew Berry off. He lost to me in the championship game. So I got to get out of doing the punishment, but I don't know, maybe we need to do some sort of punishment. But like back when we started doing this, it wasn't that big of a deal. Now, if you do win the toilet bowl, you get an extra roster spot. So we have an award for trying to keep for people that keep trying, even though their team may be out of it. So we have things that we do to incentivize people to still keep trying to play, but we don't have any punishments other than the next year, everyone just making fun of you at the draft.
Well, yeah, and in a good home league, you got so much else working for you when it comes to engagement and that kind of stuff. So that's a good one. One extra roster spot. I really like that. That's a good idea. So when it comes to your experiences playing the game, I know you've done some high stakes stuff. Like, what's your what moment in your fantasy experience stands out to you the most? When it comes to like an achievement that you've had.
I mean, achievement wise, like it's getting to do this full time. But if it's truly like, hey, leagues, that you've played in, 2018, I finished second in the FFPC. Like, so, I mean, I was that year first place was 250 grand. It wasn't to the million that it is today. But I finished second. 3 years before that, I had 2 of the top 5 teams. So, I love playing all the high stakes stuff. I love the FFPC contest. There's so many great contests out there now. So, those would be the biggest monetary, like season long moments, that I've had. And it's man, those are great sweats when you get down to the end, and you're racing in that last week trying to win those points. And I lost, I went from 250 grand to 30 grand, by literally 3 targets to Zach Ertz. If any of them are caught, I win. I win the 250K. And one of them is Nick Foles. It's the year Nick Foles took over, and they went on to win the Super Bowl that season. But it's literally a pass where Zach Ertz is blocking, and then he just kind of leaks out and turns around like this. I mean, he's behind the line of scrimmage. He's like 5 yards from Nick Foles, and Nick Foles overthrows him, way over his head. I remember screaming at the TV being like, oh my God, you have to be kidding me. Like, this can't be happening. And then the same drive, there was a touchdown catch down the seam from inside like the 5-yard line where Zach Ertz gets overthrown. And my brother had come over, and he brought all his kids over, and his youngest son, Henry, was probably 3 or 4 at the time. And he's running around the house. He's going, Ertz, Ertz, Ertz. Like, so they were all chanting for Ertz, but it was still fun. Like, hey, it was a great season. Didn't quite get there in the end, to win first place, but second was good. Before that, like 2 teams in the top 5, and had Peyton Manning with Julius Thomas stacked on both of those. It was Jamal Charles the year he went absolutely bonkers. Had Eddie Lacy. It was his rookie year. So it's like I can still remember these teams, and I remember these sweats, and they're all really fun moments.
That's the great stuff about fantasies. Those moments, those thrills, like you don't forget the details. That's great. So eventually you decided to go from a career to diving back into fantasy. Obviously, you did you started out with like Fighting Chance, I believe, and then you got hooked up with Brian Drake for the Fantasy Hustle, which was so much fun to watch you guys do your thing over there. And then obviously you've dabbled with Football Guys, I believe, and ETR, and then Pro Football Focus. Like, what were those experiences like? Talk to me a little bit about that timeline.
Yeah, so I took a sabbatical from the corporate world in 2018, and one of my goals for that time was to do more writing in the fantasy space, just to have something that I was really wanting to do. We took that time before my son was headed to college, and we wanted to just be able to do stuff as a family. And I got fortunate, some things worked out like at work with bonuses and all sorts of things. And my wife had always said, okay, we basically had this much, like when would I take like a year away and do a sabbatical? And a lot of things lined up. Was really fortunate that worked out. And so during that time, I wanted to start writing. Brian Drake reached out to me, and he was like, "Hey, like I'm looking to start a podcast." And I didn't know Brian from Adam. And so we had a phone call. I could tell I really liked him. Brian's such a good dude. He's so easygoing, and man, he could do live radio professionally. Like Brian he's got a great voice. He's great at teeing people up. Yeah. He's energetic. He's funny. He's very witty. Has a good sense of humor. And he loves football. He's got a passion for it, and he also understands the game. He's a good fantasy player, and so we were instantly like just a great match, because I was more like the talking analytical mind kind of Ben, and then he was really more had a little bit of a different approach than me, and like just the blend together was kind of like that Reese's moment of chocolate and peanut butter. You get the Reese's out of it. And so Brian's still one of my best friends. To this day we text pretty often. We still talk on the phone, but we didn't know each other. Like he's an Eagles fan and I'm a Cowboys fan, so that was fun. And that was my entry path to Fighting Chance Fantasy, with Ryan Hallam and Steve Rappin, who were running that at the time. So those guys gave me a platform. So I just started writing there, and then from there started writing with Matt Waldman over at the RSP, doing some stuff for him as well. And like I was a huge film junkie, and I had always read Matt's stuff, and I just really had, respected him for a long time in the industry with the process that he had behind watching film. So was very fortunate to get a chance to work with him. And man, he taught me so much about fantasy, about creating content. He was huge for me, in my career. And talk about someone that's still one of my close friends. We talk all the time, and when we get on the phone, like we both know, it's like probably going to be an hour to 2 hours. We're going to sit there and talk on the phone, and we probably do that once a month. Like Waldman's just a great guy. So worked with him on his newsletter, things for his site, wrote some articles. And then from there, Football Guys, which is where he was at. And, I had been on Sigmund Bloom's pod a couple of times, on the couch. And so I worked with them for a season where I wrote this thing called the projection spectrum that we came up with, and wrote about here are all the different outcomes potentially we see for this player on the role that they could have for the year. Got to meet Adam Harstead there as well. So a lot of great guys at Football Guys at that time, and still obviously over there. Joe Bryant, was amazing to me. So a lot of good people along the way, helping me. I've been very fortunate with the places I worked. And then Establish the Run reached out to me. Evan Silva actually reached out about, the utilization stuff that was kind of starting to take off and get more popular on Twitter. And that was really the first platform where I was started writing weekly about the utilization report, somewhat similar to the format you guys are used to, people are used to today. And that was an amazing time. Adam Levitan was great to me. Taylor Caby, who helps run the show over there, like he was awesome. Just such a supportive team. And then from there, Pro Football Focus, I started writing with them as I was re-entering the corporate world. I re-entered the corporate world while I was with ETR. And then Pro Football Focus came to me, and they were like, "Hey, would you want to, do the utilization report over here?" And it gave me access to all this data that PFF has. And so ETR was great. They understood for that first year. Actually, utilization report was on the ETR site and over at Pro Football Focus. So we split that up, and that was amazing. And got to work with a lot of guys over at PFF. That's where I met Ian Hartitz. We started podcasting to get today. So, man, like I've been so fortunate. Like the people I'm telling you, like that I've got to work with, have all been A+ human beings and at their job, like in what they do. I mean, I've got to work with some of the greatest people in the industry, and all of them have been amazing, to work with, and really good to me, and so willing to lend a helping hand. So just says a lot, about our industry. But then after working for PFF, like on the side, moonlighting, and I was still in the corporate world, they ultimately came to me and we talked about me potentially taking a full-time role. And it's not, honestly, it was something I never knew for sure, Kevin, if it would happen, because the salary requirements that I had, and some of the offers I had seen in the past, there just was no way. Like I have 3 kids, I had kids going into college, like, and I mean, the corporate world where I was coming from, I had a really good paying job. So I didn't know like if it was ever going to work out. And PFF was able to get to a spot where it was like, okay, like it's gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt, but it's a dream, and I'm gonna make a run at it. And so they were able to get the salary to a spot to where I could do that. Man, I'm so thankful for it. And then ultimately that led to Fantasy Life. And then Matthew Berry reached out to me. He's like, hey, like we got this Fantasy Life thing, that we're going to be kicking off, and we want to make it something bigger, and there was an opportunity there. They talked about building tools for the utilization report and all that. Elliot Chris had all these great calls with him. Jordan Fiegelman, who was there at the time, was amazing. So after really getting to know those guys, I was like, okay, like I'm gonna make this jump to go over to Fantasy Life and try to build something from the scratch, which I was very excited about. I'd worked in more of a startup mentality company in the past in my corporate life, and I'd really loved it and enjoyed it. So Fantasy Life was really giving me this mix, of being part of building a company, still getting to be writing about fantasy football every day, but getting to build out this suite of tools. And look, I can't say enough positive things about every stop, that I've had along the way. And each one has kind of prepared me more and more for the next stop.
Well, what a journey. And so many, like you said, I mean, so many incredible people, best of the best when it comes to the fantasy football industry. I can't imagine, what you've gleaned from all those great people along the way. And it's obviously it shows with the work you've done and the work you do. And it's it's wonderful to see you find your home with Fantasy Life, because these people at Fantasy Life are pretty incredible. You guys are doing amazing things over there. I mean, you got the Fantasy Life magazine that just dropped, man. Like
crazy.
Like how fun is it to be a part of a project like that and to see see your work inside
probably
like that?
More cool for someone my age, because I grew up in the era
With
of where really websites were just coming onto the scene when I first started playing fantasy football, and Draft Sharks was one of the first ones. But yeah, I mean, I lived in the era. My first fantasy football draft, I drafted straight from a magazine. I mean, that's where my cheat sheet came from. So I always have a soft spot for those magazines. And like when I used to travel in the corporate world all the time, like when June and July would roll around and I'm at the airport, man, I'm picking those things up. Like, and I still, like, if I see them today, like I still have this tendency that I want to still pick it up and read it. So that was a really cool, that was another one of those pinch me moments, and having my family members send me pictures of them holding it after they just bought it at the store, or taking a picture like with the magazine behind them on the shelf. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's fun to look through that and see so many great people that I've met in this industry that are contributing at Fantasy Life. Again, amazing people. When it comes to trends in fantasy and where things are going, where do you expect things to head in the next few years?
I mean, I think we're just continuing. Like when you look at the advanced data front, for football, like it's so, I don't want to call it behind, but like it is behind where baseball, is, for instance. And baseball, has had all these advanced stats for years and years. Obviously, they continue to improve as well. But like we're still getting all this new data with all the microchips and all the tracking technology from Zebra. And, we've got all these advanced data sites and analytic companies that are diving full head on into football now. So we're just going to have a wealth of new data where we'll have to continue, to really parse through it and say, okay, what's important? Does this actually correlate, to future fantasy success or future production in the league? And so it's fun because we've constantly got all of these new things that we can be researching. And I will say this, like, I'll go down a rabbit hole for sometimes 6-8 hours, or sometimes even 2 days, to get all the data cleaned up, get it in a spot and get it positioned and everything where you can test it in the right way to say, do these two new things matter? And I'll say 90% of the time, like they're not important, but like you still have to track down every one of these things to find the few things that actually you think could potentially help give you a new edge in the game of fantasy. Obviously, I think AI is going to be huge. So that's something that I've been really trying to spend more time, reading about this off season. And obviously, the gambling side of things, how much gambling, is exploding, is bringing more and more eyeballs to fantasy and to betting and to just players, right? And what they're going to do in a game. So there's a large influx of money, that's come into the space. Now, not all of those companies have worked out. We've seen some of them kind of fall to the wayside, but for, I think, the ones that remain, the amount of dollars like that can go into the budget. It's going to be bigger than what it already is bigger, right? Than what it used to be for mom and pop shops that were trying to run fantasy, content. So it's nice. You got all this new data. You've got these potential, things with AI. You've got an influx of money into the industry. So I think when you put all that together, I think there will be new things that we're going to find in the future that we're like, wow, like this really is a new finding. And we can potentially get a new edge, whether it is us trying to pick player props or trying to figure out, which guy to start, in our fantasy lineup.
Yeah, there's so much out there, a bright future for sure. So many great content creators out there as well. So many amazing people that we've met in this community. Talk to me a little bit about the fantasy community. You've obviously mentioned a lot of names already, but events like the Fantasy Football Expo, what has that experience been like for you? Actually, getting to meet people in person and connect.
Yeah, getting to we've got this social media, some people call it the social media bubble, but you certainly get used to other personalities in the bubble and you become friends with them online, virtually, I guess, if you will. And so to get to actually go meet those people live in person, like it's always an absolute, joy. And just getting to meet people that you interact with, period, on Twitter. Not all of it is content or other social media platforms. Not all of it is, other content creators. It's just getting to hang out with people that, may read your content, or you've just interacted with on social media. So it's a really cool moment because everybody comes together and it's a well done event. Whenever you talk about the Fantasy Football Expo, and it's just set up where there's a lot of time for people to, relax and get to hang out, have an adult beverage if that's your thing, play some cornhole, like getting to go there and meeting, John Daigle for the first time live. Like John's a great guy. Rich Rebar, getting to meet him live for the first time. It's the first place that I met Brian Drake. Like Brian and I had never met, person to person, for I think the first 3 years that we had done content together. So yeah, it's awesome being there and everybody, it hanging out at night. Everybody's down, at the DoubleTree, everybody, that bar is always so packed and it's almost like they never remember that. Oh, we probably should staff like 2 or 3 bartenders for that night. And you're just getting to meet all of these different people, that you work with. So it's an absolute blast getting to come together. And like you mentioned, there's just so many other talented people in this space and getting to have that chat with them one-on-one. I remember I was there talking with Matthew Friedman, who now is over at Fantasy Life, and we had never met in person. And we're sitting there chatting and we find out we're from the same hometown. Like we had no clue. Like, what are the chances that we're both from the same hometown in Texas? And so just those cool moments like that.
It is true. There's a lot less football chatter that you would expect at an event like that. A lot of it is personal, and there's so many personal relationships and friendships that develop where common bonds are found that are even outside of fantasy. Fantasy brings everybody together at an event like that. But it's cool how relationships, professional and personal relationships, form
Absolutely.
from an event like that. So
For sure.
It's always fun to get to know people at a different level. So let's dive into some rapid fire questions, learn a little bit more about you and some of the other things that are maybe outside of fantasy. But first, what do you enjoy most about what you're doing professionally at this time?
I still enjoy the most whenever I've got like this itching question about something and I'm going to go do the research and dive into the data and try to find the answer. Don't always find the answer, or the answer may not be what you think, but it's that unknown and being willing to challenge, like, conventional thinking, or, we just don't have an answer for something. You're trying to figure out, is it important? Like I said, a lot of times it goes to a dead end. But like there's that part of me that always wants to learn more, to see if there's an edge somewhere that we can be getting. Though those are the things I enjoy. A lot of the things I do, but those are still like the most pure moments of enjoyment.
And a perfect example of that is wide receiver age and falling off the cliff, right?
Yeah, wrote that, and that just came out today, so people want to go check it out. Look, it's something that's been written about time and time again, and there's been a lot of really great articles on age cliffs, the impact of it on different positions. But I just really, looking at what was going on, looking at some of the advanced data that we have, I wanted to really test out a lot of new things against age. And so the first question is, okay, what is the overall impact of age? When can we expect a wide receiver's best years to be? And that's been pretty common. We've seen that people, and I've generally found what other people have found, but then trying to take it, another step past that, like, okay, well, are there trends around the guys that fell off? Are there certain kind of archetypes where they actually have shown they can play longer versus others where, oh, they may fall off the cliff sooner than this other type of wide receiver? So other ways basically that we can make it more actionable. It's great to know that age 23 to 27 is pretty safe, and that's when you're getting your prime years. But also, if we're looking at guys that are age 30, we know that 50% of the time, or age 31, 50% of the time, if they're elite wide receivers, qualifying that, I know it's supposed to be rapid fire, but saying they've had at least 4 wide receiver 1 finishes in their career, over 50% of those guys in their age 31 season still post another wide receiver 1 finish. But like another 45% literally fall off the cliff to be a wide receiver 4. So it'd be kind of nice to know, like, am I just flipping a coin here, or is there a little bit more to this? And maybe that would lead me more to being able to say, this guy's more likely to be one that can still be a wide receiver 1, whereas this wide receiver is probably one that I want to avoid because here are the signs. So really digging into all those things. I love doing that kind of stuff.
Well, see, I set you up with that, rapid fire, but I had to throw that in there.
That kind of loaded question, man. Come on.
It's loaded because you are passionate about it. That's why I had to throw that in there because it's a great example of just your passion for the numbers and what you do. So that was awesome. Well, what sets Fantasy Life apart from other fantasy football resources, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think well, we've got a great team. We've got an absolute great team, but there are other great teams in the industry. There's a lot of very talented people that are out there, but where we're pushing with our tools combined with who we have as far as a team, and you guys are going to see a lot of new things that are going to be coming out. We have a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and we've been raising capital. We've got a large influx of money that we're trying to invest back into the fantasy and into the betting realm and give all that stuff back to the people. So it's really the combination of those things. But man, I tell you, for me personally, I just love who I get to wake up and work with, every single day. Like I love every single person that I work with at our company, the behind the scenes people, the people that are on the screen, the people that are on podcasts that I'm getting to talk with. But I'll tell you this, like, they are all super hard workers. They're all innovative, and like, they just have a passion to be good people, and they have a passion to succeed. And so when you work at a company like that, it's so infectious, and it's so easy just to wake up and have a good day.
Yeah, I can see it. Elliott's amazing when it comes
Elliott
to
is an amazing
leadership,
leader.
right?
He's an absolute amazing leader. He enables people to win at their jobs. And for me, that's the best way to describe a leader. The best people that I worked for in my career have basically realized, like, okay, this is where your passion is. This is where you're really good. And then they set you up to succeed. And so I've tried to be that way. Like, if I've been in leadership roles in the past, and I think Elliott is a great example of what a good leader looks like.
There you go. And Kendall Valenzuela, like, she is just amazing in so many ways.
She's a rock star. I tell Kendall all the time, I said, one day when you're on ESPN or you're calling the World Series or whatever, like, just remember I did this Sirius XM show with you. Like, Kendall is a amazing person and a superstar.
Well, and I'm fortunate as a Seattle guy. We got a Mariner connection. We got a Seahawk connection.
Oh, great!
So,
yeah.
So
Kendall, man, she's got some good old Mariner stories. Like,
oh, for sure, for sure.
Batgirl.
Yeah, exactly. The best in the business. How's working with Matthew Berry influenced your approach to fantasy football?
Oh man, Matthew he's a mover and a shaker, man. This guy, he knows everyone in the industry. He's good to other people in the industry, and man, he has an absolute passion, to succeed as well. I mean, and what he does for the company, like, as far as working behind the scenes and helping raise capital and all those things, that a lot of things people don't know about Matthew Berry, and like, it's inspirational. Like, honestly, like, he knows everyone. He knows everyone in the industry, and he has connections, and like, he's just someone that people gravitate to, and he's an easy guy to be around, and he's a good leader, and he puts his leader, Elliott, and the leadership team, he puts them, Dan Kaufman, who recently came over, formerly of The Athletic and The Messenger and ESPN before that, now leading our content team, Nando DeFino, great. He knows how to hire good people too. I have to say that, like, Matthew has a good eye for high end talent, and his ideas that he has, along with Elliott, about how we want to build the team out. I mean, there hasn't been a hire that I've not been on board with. I've been very excited about everything from that standpoint. So, and I'll just say, like, Matthew, like, he's taken not just the dream and he's turned it into being, really, a megastar, and not just the money that he can earn doing it, but like, he's an ambassador for really all of fantasy, like what Matthew does. So if Matthew's not good or he doesn't perform well, like it can look bad on everyone. And I think that he does a good job of continually living up to the hype. And, he has a lot on his plate, and that guy can manage a lot of stuff. And I've seen him coming out of meetings somewhere else, and I have to jump on a quick pod with him. And he's got to remember some one-liner, and somebody feeds it to him one time, and boom, he's got it. And he just spits it back into the camera. I'm like, holy crap. Like, doesn't need another take, doesn't need anything. Like he's amazing, man. The guy's a powerhouse.
I believe it. Yeah, you say he knows everybody on the inside of the industry, but he knows everybody on the outside too. He's pretty amazing.
Oh man. So one day I'm running, and he calls me. I ignore the call. I'm like, I'll call him when I get back. It's like 6:00. It's hot in Texas, so I run later. It might have been like 7. He calls back right away. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? So I stopped and answer. He's like, hey, you got a cheat sheet ready or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, let me get back to the house. I'll send it over to you. He's like, want to know who it's for? He's like, I just don't have one handy or whatever. And he's like, it's for Chris Pratt. And I'm like, what? Like, Chris Pratt had texted him saying, hey, I got a fantasy draft. And I just need something really quickly that's updated that I can draft off of. And so this doesn't happen in my life, but it does happen in Matthew Berry's life. Obviously a guy that's been in the Avengers.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this next question, I was setting you up, but I didn't realize you appreciated Barry so much. I was going to say, how many more yards would Barry Sanders have gotten behind that Emmitt Smith offensive line?
Oh, man. Probably he would be the all-time leader, probably even retiring at 30. I don't know. Emmitt's quite a bit ahead because he got a few extra years. But, man, it would have been amazing to watch. But there's also this part of me, like, when they tried to put Barry behind a fullback, and really running that way, it wasn't great for him. He was really best as a freelancer. So part of you almost wonders, like, did the dysfunctional offensive line almost help him in a way like a punt returner, right? Where you draw everybody in and then you like squeak out of those first 2 tackles. And now you look at the next layer of defense. There's not a next layer of defense. It's like, boom, you get to that next level and you're gone. So I've kind of thought about that, but undoubtedly I think Barry would have had more. But I'll say Emmitt was the fit for what the Cowboys wanted to do at that time, which was, pound it, very patient runner, get behind Daryl Johnson as a fullback. But obviously Barry, and Emmitt will tell you this, Barry was ridiculous. Barry was the best running back I've ever seen.
Yeah, in all due respect to Emmitt Smith, because one of the greatest warriors in football history.
And dude, Emmitt has some amazing highlights that people forget about. Go watch the Atlanta Falcons one where he goes into a pile of guys. It looks like he's gone, and then he pops out the other side and he's gone. It wasn't all just, offensive line blocked everything up and the defense sold out to stop the run. They missed him and he took off. He had a lot of those plays because of the fact that they're leading late in games and teams are trying to get the ball back, and the Cowboys had an amazing offensive line, but he also had amazing vision. Emmitt's patience and his vision were on another level. So I think sometimes when people just look at him like, anybody could have done that behind the Cowboys line, I don't really buy into that. But I'm willing to admit that Barry Sanders is the best I've ever watched play.
There you go. Yeah, Emmitt, all-time legend. Barry, let's go GOAT. What are your favorite hobbies and activities outside of fantasy sports?
I love to play the guitar. I try to hang out with buddies once every other week or so and just jam, sing, do a little whatever. And honestly, a lot of that's camaraderie. I'm also, I don't get to play near as much, but I love playing poker. I love any sort of strategy game that has to do with numbers, percentages, odds, but then also there's just the random variable of humans, and then that coming into play. So pretty much anything like that. Like, what's funny is like, I've never got into chess, but like my boys play chess. And maybe I should, because I feel like chess, I don't know why. Chess is something I probably would really like, but like I didn't grow up around it. Nobody really played it, at my house. But I love Monopoly. I love board games, anything like that. I love getting into.
Love it. People want to know, what hair products do you use? Because you probably got the best hair in fantasy football.
Oh man, I don't know. There's some pretty good sets of hair out there, but like I give my credit to my wife. She's a hairstylist. So honestly, she has a certain store that she goes to and she gets me the latest and the best stuff. So I just go with whatever she brings me, but typically it's some sort of, almost like a balm that I rub in my hands, and I don't like it to be a lot of it because I like my hair to still be able to move, but not be frizzy or whatever. So it's typically something like that. You're rubbing in your hands, just rub it through, not mousse. It's thicker than that. And it's not gel. I don't want my hair to be like hard and crisp. So it has to be something that allows it to still move, but just enough like to hold it in place.
There you go. It's an art, but you got to be blessed with that fine set of hair, that head of hair too. So genetics.
Hey, we take it where we can get it. Everybody has some sort of good genes. Mine was just the hair, I guess.
What's your all-time favorite TV show?
All-time favorite TV show is Seinfeld, man.
Okay.
Just amazing characters, amazing writing. It's funny, like there are people that don't like Seinfeld. I don't get it. I think like the characters on there are just amazing. All bangers. Yeah. I love Seinfeld.
For sure. How about an all-time favorite movie? And
Tombstone.
All-time hey. Okay,
Tombstone,
okay.
All-time favorite movie. So many good movies to pick from, but that's just one that, man, anytime it's on, and that's kind of how my rule. How do I tell what my all-time favorite movie is? Like, if it just happens to be on and I'm walking by, well, I stop down and watch it. And anytime Tombstone is on, and Val Kilmer just crushes that. Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday is like one of my favorite performances all time in the movie. So love Tombstone.
And if you love Tombstone, you don't even need to have the volume on because you know all the words.
I
right?
know all I can recite it.
So many lines. I love it. How about an all-time favorite sports movie?
Major League, the original Major League. Wesley.
You and I, man. You and I, man. like Tombstone in Major League.
Calling a shot as a catcher. I mean, you got Charlie Sheen, as Rick Vaughn, the closer. You got Bob Uecker in there. That was. I used to watch that show religiously whenever I was a kid. I was a huge baseball fan growing up as well, and Major League was playing all the time at our house.
Well, yeah, Tombstone and Major League. Those are my two, I would say as well. How about all-time? Yeah, how about all-time favorite musician or artist?
It's Jason Isbell. Like I have a lot of artists I love. Like I grew up so I have the nostalgia stuff. I grew up in Fort Worth, and the Toadies were a band that exploded at that time, and I think they're actually a very underrated like alternative rock band for that phase and that genre. So they're excellent. But I just think that Jason Isbell, man, is, if you're like songwriting and guitar playing, I think he's honestly probably in the top 3 or 4 on the planet in both buckets. Like amazing. I think he's the best songwriter right now out there. And then if you look at him as just a guitar player, he's up there really with anyone. The dude can just absolutely shred. I got a chance to go see him at Red Rocks in May with a couple of buddies, and it was just an absolute amazing show. I think I've seen him 5 times now. Like I try not to miss him if he's anywhere close that I can get to.
I love it. What are you most grateful for at this time?
Man, I'm thankful for so many things, but I think the biggest thing is like I've seen some people, around me, unfortunately, like have health issues, is just being, more mindful, like, and just thankful, like that, you don't always have your health. And so I'm so thankful, to have it. I mean, I'm 48 too. So you start thinking about like, oh man, like 20 years, I'll be 68, like I'll nearly be 70. And so just thinking of not taking for granted, like things that I can do today that hopefully I'll still be able to do all them, when I'm 70, but will I? So just, trying to enjoy doing all the physical activities that I may not be able to do, one day, or take for granted that something happens with health, man. And just real respect for people that go through major health issues in their life and still battle through, and you still have a job and you still have a family. But it's just, it's something I try to pick something that I'm more mindful about being thankful for. Obviously there's so many things. Like I have an amazing family. I'm so thankful for my wife, my kids, my job, that I get to do what I'm doing, for people that actually want to read or listen to stuff that I do. Like I still sometimes can't believe that. So, I mean, I could go on and on about things that I'm thankful for, but like the thing I've been trying to focus on lately is, hey, just be very thankful for your health. And you hear it all the time from people that are getting older, and they're like, hey man, like health is the one thing. They would trade all their money away to have their health back. Well, why? Because health is like, if you have good health, you can get out and you can be active. And what's that about? Well, that's about being able to still connect, with other people and connect with nature. And, some people aren't fortunate enough to still, be blessed in those ways. So I just try to be thankful for that. That's
great. Yeah. Gratitude is very important. And you're right, with health. I mean, you got to be healthy to enjoy the things that you're grateful for. Right. So I love that answer. It's a good answer. Great answer. What advice do you have for people that are, looking to follow your footsteps and get more involved in the fantasy space?
I would say, go after your passion. Find something that, you are really into that might solve something new in the space. That doesn't mean that everything you do has to be new or innovative. the other way to do it, like, is you've just got a great personality and let that shine through and you be you, like you be true to you. Like there are a lot of content creators that I don't think necessarily are coming up with all original stuff, but I like watching their stuff just because I like watching them. Like I'm like, man, this person is so good at delivering all this information. They're concise with it. They're funny with it. So I think there's so many different ways, to being successful. My personal bend is like trying to find things that maybe haven't necessarily been solved for, or things that maybe, we can make it just a little bit better. But there are only so many of those things. Like I told you, a lot of my research ends up pointing to something that's just an absolute dead end. So if that's the way you are, you have to also enjoy that process of knowing that even if it's the dead end, you enjoy the fact that you still went down the road, you went down the path. But I would say the biggest thing is, being, true, to yourself and finding what your strengths are and your passion are. I'm a true believer in like this thing that I call the sweet spot. I didn't invent it. Like there's a lot of people that talk about the sweet spot, but it's literally, okay, what are you passionate about? That's one circle. Okay. And these circles need to all overlap. And then there's, what are you good at? What are your skills? And then the community, whether that's your work, whether that's fantasy, whatever that is, like what's the need in that space? And the thing that sits in the middle of all three of those things, that's your sweet spot. And I think if you can figure out what that is, then you're really on, a path to something, because you want to still be you. You don't want to ever be in a position where you're not yourself when you're doing your job. And if you can find that middle zone that hits all three of those things, typically what I found is people that find that, they're very successful in life.
That's great. Yeah, it's great advice for sure. Obviously, if you could find a niche, that is wonderful. But authenticity is massive when it comes to doing content creation and just in life. As you say, find that sweet spot.
Yeah, that's it for anything, man.
Right.
Whether it's you're wanting to get into fantasy or whether it's just your current job that you're in. Yeah, I think constantly thinking through those three things. That kind of goes back to the thing I was talking about with my kids. When they say, "Oh, I like video games," I'm like, "Well, what about the video game?" Like you're trying to get at what's the passion and what are you good at, part of the equation. And then you have to find like what's the community that you can lock into where you can now bring value through those things.
Great. So much wisdom in that. I love that. Anything we haven't covered before we close things out here, Dwain?
No, man, I think we've hit everything. I just want to say major thanks to you. I love getting to do this kind of show. It's not the kind that I normally get to do. And just a quick shout out to all the people that have just been absolutely amazing, like in my journey to where I'm at, whether that be Brian Drake, the guys over at Fighting Chance, Matt Wallman, Matthew Berry, George Shahiri from Pro Football Focus, Chris Collinsworth, Ian Harditz, getting to work with him. Pete Overzet, absolutely just freaking hilarious. Kendall Valenzuela, Matthew Freeman. I could just go on and on, man. I've got to work with so many amazing people. I'm going to miss it. But, my wife too, like my wife is just, she's been supportive of this all the way. I mean, I had to take, even though I got to a salary that we could live on, I had to take a major pay cut to leave corporate to come into fantasy. And, we were making a bet on, basically being able to grow that into a bigger role. And that's worked out, but I wouldn't be able to do it, without her support. And she was when I say support, like she, stood 100% behind me, and, was basically cheering me on the whole way. Never was there a moment of, oh, wow, well, you switch jobs and now we can't take this vacation. It was like, hey, you're doing this thing that you love. And, we're going to make more money in the future and we'll get to do, maybe a vacation that we gave up, because when I first took the job, like we were going on multiple vacations a year. And we had to cut it down to one. And then when my oldest son got in college, there was a year we didn't get to go on a vacation. So there's things like that we had to sacrifice as a family. And, my kids were also very supportive, but that stems down like from her. And so I have to say, like my wife and everything that she's done supporting me is, I'm really lucky.
Yeah. That is fantastic to hear. I think that gratitude for your support system is as big as it gets. I think it's wonderful to hear that you have that support behind you, because you're doing amazing things and so many people are appreciative of the work you're doing. I love everything you're doing. I can't wait to see where your future goes, because everything that you're doing and everything that Fantasy Life is doing is just amazing. And I can't wait to see where it all ends up. Looking forward to seeing you, hopefully in Canton. Maybe are you going to be down there this year?
I'm not for sure yet. We're trying to work out. I want to go, but we're trying to figure out if we're going to be doing something from a team standpoint at Fantasy Life. So once I figure that out, I'll commit to yes or no. I'm going to Canton. I want to go. I've gone the last 2 years. I've absolutely enjoyed it. A lot of people that I really enjoy being around are going to be there. So I want to go, but I can't commit just yet.
Regardless of when I see you next, can't wait to see what you do in fantasy moving forward, and best of luck in 2024. Thanks again for coming on. It was an honor to have you, and definitely a privilege having this conversation.
Thanks. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.